I'll make it, I'll make it, I'll make it, I'll make it,
Good afternoon. It's 3 p.m. Sunday, August 27th, 2023. We're gathered here today to play the third case in Dear Holmes, the play-by-mail. Calling it a game is a bit of a stretch, but we're reading letters. We're trying to figure out what's happening. I was thinking, you watch all these YouTube channels or we watch TV, people get in a habit. They introduce each video the same way. They say the same catchphrases. They end their videos in the same way. Why do we don't have to live like that? Why does anyone have to live like that? So we're going to try to do things differently when we get a chance. All right. Let's catch up with the chat first and see what everyone's up to. It shows that there are 8 people in the stream today, so we've got a small turnout. The letter just arrived yesterday, so I almost didn't have a stream for today. Did any of our detectives in the channel detect anything different other than the way I introduced? I guess you know humans are creatures of habit, and getting into a habit is helpful for not making mistakes or forgetting things, so I probably do forget things. Let me do a little bit of bookkeeping before we jump in. The channel can let me know if they're up to any new projects or anything. Okay, so Dear Holmes seems to be having trouble getting letters out every week. So I suspect that we will not get our next letter by next Sunday. So what I've done is I've scheduled a live Q&A channel update for next Sunday. I'm trying to do them 4 times a year. So the last one was 3 months ago, so it makes sense. September 3rd, Sunday at 3 p.m., I'll do another channel update. Happy to answer questions of any type. If you want to submit your questions earlier, you can go to the Board Game Geek Guild for this channel. There's a link on the About tab of the YouTube page that will bring you to the Board Game Geek Guild forum where you can post any questions. I'll start a thread for it. I'm happy to talk about psychology of YouTube and gaming. Asking me questions like I'm an expert on board gaming is not going to be very helpful for any of us. So I'd rather just chat if you've got stuff you want to chat about. Okay, what else should we talk about? I posted a set of 3 videos on the channel last week. Actually, a bunch of videos since our last live stream. A review of Night Hunter, which we all played together on the channel. A review of the Second Suspects box, which we all played. And then Greg and I filmed a review, a quick recommendation review, and a full playthrough for Sky Team, which is now up on the channel, all three of those videos. We liked it quite a lot. You might want to check that out, especially if you're looking for a quick game. All right, what else do we need to talk about before we get started and open up the next letter? You'll remember that Dear Holmes has changed up their system a little bit. It used to be 4 letters and then a 5th solution letter. Now they've gone to 3 letters and then a 4th solution letter. So this will be our last letter before we get the solution from Holmes, or the fake Holmes as we've been thinking about it. And this has been an interesting case. I'm not going to recap it again because I did a long recap last week, but to remind you of what we got in our last letter. In our last letter, oh, that seems a little bright, doesn't it? In our last letter, the boat was found. We got more details about how he went out on the boat and then didn't come back. They found the main winch had some damage. They found a bottle of alcohol. They thought, oh, maybe he got drunk, the police think. And then we're introduced to a couple more people that could be up to no good. People that worked on the carriage and the boat. We're told that the night before the accident, they were moving documents. There's a little bit of suspicion of away from the butler towards the bank manager, Edward Granger, and a discussion about how they all used to hang out with the father on Friday nights at the bar, and so someone may have let slip that he had withdrawn all this money in cash, and maybe one of them robbed him. Then we got the will, which was written 3 years ago, we noted. And the will had some interesting clues. Everything is sort of coalescing to our central theory that the father is pretending to be dead to get the sons to reconcile. And we got a couple more clues here. One is that the father in the will said, I don't want my departure to be published. And he leaves this boat to the butler, not to the kids. Like, is he hanging out on a boat? And then he writes a little bit to his sons. He says, if you're reading this, it means I am no longer among those on earth, but fret not, my boys, for I watch from afar. That seems like maybe a little hint that he's off on an island watching. And then he says, I failed to unite our family as your mother wanted. So again, this makes sense with our theory that he's trying to do this to bring the sons together. And then he has this cryptic message here. The greatest wish for which I plead is that you both complete this deed. Bare your hearts, forgive your sins before the queen, a talk twixt twins. A little allusion to Alice in Wonderland, and one of the brothers thinks this means they should have their heart-shaped pendants that he gave them. We're not quite sure what forgive your sins means, but we think this is a coded reference to something they should do at the statue of the Queen in the Wonderland garden that he built. Then we're told that the financial manager offers to purchase the boat, which is a little suspicious because at the end here, we get a note about the recent work done to the boat. And the key thing that we noticed was they redesigned the keel, what we think is the bottom of the boat, or the place where the cabin or something, I guess. And then there's this note here about how the mass density of the keel has changed from 11 to 19. And we made a note. Is it because he's hidden all the gold that he's withdrawn down there? And then there seems to be in the chat more confirmation that this is matching the density of gold. I noticed something else while I was rereading it, and I wanted to get your thoughts on that. If you look at the other work that was done, look at this one. 2 mahogany name boards with brass letters. And I wonder if this means that he's changing the name on the boat. What is he doing here? That doesn't really make sense, though, because now that I think of it, they recover the boat. But I wonder if this isn't... I wonder if it's not put here, but it's actually been done to the other boat. There is another boat. Remember, the boat he's leaving, he says he's leaving to the butler, is called the Herald of the Morning. So there's no mention of these new name boards. I really wonder if this isn't changing the name of one of the boats, if not this boat. And here's painting. This was making me think, but I guess this is paint for the keel that they replaced. Do you think this is just, hey, when you change the keel, you got to change the name boards and it's nothing that we should worry about? It is too. Mark Poole says in the chat, is it possible it's a name board for each brother, or is it a name board for the port and starboard and something you have to do whenever you replace the keel? I don't know. But when I read this a second time, I thought, oh, he's changing the name of the boat. But then they found the boat, so it can't be so simple as that. All right, and then the other brother writes us and tells us about the blueprints. This was the big piece of new evidence we have. So he finds blueprints that the father made by hand rather than a professional, already suspicious. Oh, and they found a corpse that we don't know who it's going to be. He's afraid it's the father. We don't know yet. I suspect we're going to find that out today. Okay, so they find the blueprints. There's a G5 written on one of the symbols. In fact, it's all printed out here, but I did scan and print it out in 2 copies so that we could work with it a little more easily. So there's the G5, and there's the hieroglyphics and Latin. And we've translated the Latin to be house gold hidden in our last session. And then between that, people were looking up, and these look like hieroglyphics saying the same thing. So it's just a little redundant, house gold. And this is something like hidden. So we think this just means that the gold is hidden in the house, something like that. And then G5 is here. Although it was pointed out that this shouldn't be black. These are reversed, the black and white, for some reason. I feel like that's not relevant, but I could be wrong. In the letter, he says they dug up here. They didn't find anything. So we thought 2 possibilities. One is there's a chess set in this little castle. There's the Queen of Hearts statue. So it could be about that. But the other thing that was remarked in the letters was how these are drawn not to scale, but they do seem like fairly close match for the building. And it does say that this was folded in half originally. So we thought, okay, if this is our G5, it's either that you lay these on top of each other and then you get this location, since they were folded in half here. Excuse me. Or it could be that they were folded in half this way, and that it's really pointing to somewhere in here. I think probably this is the more likely case, that it's supposed to go like this, but I don't know. So either around here or here, which I've marked here. All right. Is there anything I'm missing in that recap of last week's letter before we get to this week's letter? Let's catch up. Let me see what I've missed. Okay, so comment about the storms. Forgive each other's sins. So we were thinking, our theory was that maybe there's some action they have to perform with their pendants here at the Queen of Hearts. My guess was that the Queen of Hearts has her 2 arms outstretched, and you could imagine a sort of Indiana Jones system where they put the two pendants in the hand and it detects that exact amount of weight, which will cause something to open up. So that's still my theory. But I don't know. We were thinking, does the forgive each other's sins mean have some action that would be associated with that? And I'm not sure we have a great answer for that. All right. I do want to note there is something odd about this particular set of letters. If you're thinking about from a game design perspective, in our previous letters, they've sort of been framed like, here is this mystery we're trying to uncover, and there might occasionally be cases where you're like, I wish we could ask this person something. But this case has got this little weird element where like the boat feels like the boat has been turned, it feels like the gold is hidden in the boat. And it's very odd that we can't say, hey, look in the boat. That's where your money is. It's weird that we can't perform any actions, that we're sort of waiting for, that we've got something we'd like to do that we can't. And I think maybe if you're thinking about from game design for these kinds of play-by-mail things, if you're not going to let the players take actions, you should endeavor to not make obvious actions that they'd want to take. All right, let's open this. I see I have not got my little knife nearby, so we'll just try to... Is there a better way to do it without a knife? Not really, huh? All right, well, we'll have to do it. Sounds like Debbie is talking about leaving the UK. All right, here we go. It is completely fine with me for the chat to have their own independent discussions in the chat and only check in occasionally. Okay, so 28 June, 2 days since our last letter. Let's see what we've got here. It's a little bright. I turned up the brightness, but I didn't expect white to be so bright here. All right. Dear Mr. Holmes, after a thorough, eventful 2 days, we've returned home from Swanage, not only to your message, but also to the dreadful news that the checkmate caught fire last night. Still, I have some new information, and I'm proud to announce we have made some progress in interpreting Father's map. I will explain further below. Oops. So, the boat caught fire. Regarding the corpse examination, our consensus is that the body is most likely not Father's, though I remain uncertain. The sea works such rapid transformations. We hurried south yesterday morning in response to the message 2 nights ago, which I should note came from the police station in Swanage rather than Seafield. In my haste, and in thinking of the Seacombe cliffside, I confused the 2 villages. Nevertheless, we have since ventured there, and we're also able to inspect the checkmate, as you requested en route. We did this all together with the gracious Mr. Greeley, who had met with us for breakfast before the voyage and offered to be our chauffeur when we failed to locate William. That's the butler. His touring car, which lacks a roof, made for a mud-spattering journey in the rain, spent in silence save for Reginald's occasional complaint about the inadequacies of road travel, and Greeley's whistling. He's fond of Edgar Elgar. That's a classical composer, I believe. Someone can double check that for me. Maybe I'm thinking of someone else. On arriving, we identified ourselves to a constable posted at the front of the small station, who led us inside and down to a cellar, where another constable removed a sheet from a bloated body. It was a ghastly sight. I've studied paleontology and am used to seeing, handling even, ancient bones, but the sight of pale flesh took me by surprise. Reginald, did in fact leave the cellar for some moments before returning to observe the body. It belonged to a man of roughly Father's age and build. However, the shoulder on which our father had a prominent birthmark was no longer available to inspect. Nor could we examine the finger that would have held his wedding ring. The hair was somewhat like father's, short, dark in color, but that was the only truly similar feature. We left with no certainty and spent the night in a Swanage inn in a dismal mood. The drive back this morning was entirely silent. Greeley even refrained from whistling, though when we finally arrived at the house, he offered his condolences. "A dreadful night, eh? I can still help you boys with the yacht's sail if you want. Just say the word." Does he know the gold is in that boat? He waved, then tore away through puddles. All right, so a little bit suspicious that the body parts they would have used to make a definitive identification are gone. The shoulder got ripped off somehow, ring is gone. Very suspicious. Some minutes after that, William greeted us, and we were met with the post, including your note and the news of the fire. With a frown, he led us to the parlor and explained that he had been out at the market early for eggs the day before. He then handed my brother several letters and asked that Reginald and I sit down. I thought this involved news of father at first, but as Reginald looked through the stack of documents, William stopped him and said in one nervous breath, "Your father's, the boat, the Checkmate, last night, there was a fire." And so we learned that the Checkmate in its berth nearly burnt to ashes last night. Without the quick work of Frederick Granger, we're told, it would have been a complete loss. The vessel is still afloat, if not seaworthy, so repairs should be able to wait. And as mentioned, we were able to fulfill your request before this occurred. I will provide you with my notes at the end of this letter. After being appraised of the Checkmate's status, Reginald sent William away and called me to his side, showing me your message and handing me the rest of the post. We have yet to carry out your suggestions involving the heart pendants. Nevertheless, I'm delighted that your acquaintance, Dr. Budge from the British Museum, was so quickly able to identify the hieroglyphs in question. You have both enabled us to make great strides in uncovering the truth behind the strange blueprint in Father's study. By the time you had sent Dr. Budge's analysis, I had recognized the gibberish beneath the hieroglyphs as Latin in reverse. However, I had not realized the words. Domum aurum serale were merely translations for the symbols, nor had I determined how to utilize the so-called map. My sincere gratitude again for your instructions. Once Reginald and I folded the map in half and held it up to a light, what you noted became obvious. The blueprint of the house fits quite nicely into the boundaries of the garden chessboard. With that in mind, the tile G5 corresponds to the house's great hall. We mounted a search of the room shortly after coming to this realization. Although my brother, still angry about his miniature sarcophagus, insisted I touch nothing while he searched. Reginald frantically paced for nearly 15 minutes before declaring, "The gold must be buried beneath the floorboards." This was our theory. They figured out what we figured out. It was then that I put a stop to his frenzy and showed him what I had spotted just moments after entering the room. Beside the window overlooking our northern yard, there is a bookcase displaying small porcelain statuettes that Father collected on our travels. One of them, depicting two rabbits sailing a boat, appeared to have been placed upon a golden pedestal. After inspecting the pedestal, we discovered it was in fact a chest, smaller than my palm, made of metal that had been painted gold. The only feature it bears is a thin line in the shape of a heart, etched around a keyhole on its side. We have been unable to open it, but when shaken, it produces hardly any noise. I have suggested breaking it apart, but Reginald insists it is no doubt empty, and I won't allow a map to make a fool of me. He believes we have misinterpreted the map. I've taken it upon myself to ask William about the chest, since he may have noticed it while cleaning, but he shook his head. No, well, see, he muttered, wiping a tea tray. Mr. Roderick's never liked me cleaning that case, or the one in the parlor with the glass ornaments and curiosities. So, and, well, Mr. Reginald said he'd like me to keep doing things the same old way. William then dropped his polishing cloth. He picked it up and finished. So I haven't seen anything odd about the bookcase. I've never noticed a chest. Mr. Holmes, I do believe this chest is important. I rarely observe Father's statuettes, but I knocked over several, including the rabbits on a boat, when I accidentally walked into the bookcase no more than a month ago. I'm certain there were no pedestals beneath any of them, as it was something of an ordeal getting them all to stand upright on the shelf. I await your appraisal before again putting forth my concern with Reginald. Until then, we have come together to an extent. We both agreed that our best course of action, in light of the fire on the checkmate, was to finally pay a visit to Father's old associates at the Bird in Hand. Cannot afford to wait until Friday, so we tried our luck tonight. The only member of the Friday crew present was Farrier Benjamin Barnes, and he offered little of use. Still, our visit to the pub led to an unexpected encounter with Father's old friend Hans. When we arrived, Benjamin was standing up from his table. My brother and I are not at the greatest of ease with him, but he did ask how we were faring as he walked past us. We mentioned having some questions about Father's yacht if he could spare a moment, but he said he was pressed for time and insisted that I never helped Mr. Roderick's with that. Don't know anything about the Herald. He took his heels before Reginald or I could explain it was the checkmate we hoped to ask about. In turn, we decided to stay and have a pint ourselves. We were in the midst of this when Hans, an acquaintance of Father's who has often led our expeditions, plodded into the pub. He walked straight for Reginald and I, heaving. Boys, William said I would find you here, and what a delight, together again. He paused. Okay, I must be quick. There's work to do. Then from his vest pocket he took out a scrap of paper. Since we talked, I have thought. I should give this to the boys. Reginald and me, we played chess by post. Hans placed the paper before us. He sent me this in his last letter, a quote from a theater play. He shook his head. It seems to me he had a presentiment, eh? Then, just as abruptly as he arrived, Hans went. The paper reads, Full fathoms 5, my father lies, of his bones are coral made, those are pearls that were his eyes. My brother and I were so surprised by this that we hurried home rather than finish our ales, so that I could send word to you. Reginald sits in the great hall now while I complete this letter, which is a blessing in disguise, as you should know another detail I have kept from him. Amongst the post he handed me this afternoon was a singular perfumed envelope, sent from London and addressed to Father. Reginald must have failed to notice it amidst your note and the circulars and solicitations. I stowed it away in my room on seeing it and only opened it moments before writing this. Within the envelope was a letter written in a neat, elegant hand. Darling, how I miss you. The hours are torture without my Papa Bear. Just me sitting by the fire, holding that precious necklace you sent. Beneath that it was signed, Do not forget your dear little Lydia. I've contacted the local choirmaster again and verified that the Lydia with whom he was familiar is presently a student at the Guildhall School of Music. I have arranged for a brief consultation with their registrar Madame Caroline Billington tomorrow morning, whereupon I hope to learn about this temptress. As soon as Reginald or I have further information, we will send word. Sincerely, Robert Rodericks III. P.S. Here are my notes from our visit to the checkmate. I knew I would not be able to write to you immediately afterwards, so I was meticulous during our inspection. W drops Reg and I at the harbor. We examine the torn halyard and tools left on the cabin roof. I keep studying the scene. It all seems the same as always. R lights a cigarette, says, "You act as if you are Howard Carter on one of his archaeological digs." I answer, "Oh, perhaps, brother, it has sharpened my eye for detail." The boatyard's owner, Mr. Lackady, approaches and greets us. R asks, following Mr. Holmes's suggestion, if he has seen anyone unusual near the checkmate recently. Lackady replies, "Indeed I have. An old scrawny gentleman, funny accent, long hair and a beard, red. Air of a Viking about him. He wore a bowler. Seemed tough, but was a real gentleman when I introduced myself." Hans, I hazard? Sounds right. Said he's staying at the Mermaid Inn," Mr. Lackady adds. Again, following Mr. Holmes's suggestion, we asked Lackady about any maintenance work done to checkmate in weeks prior to the accident. Nothing for some time, just some repairs and a special project Mr. Rodericks hired a specialist in London for. Lackady claims no knowledge of the nature of the project. In his office, Lackady asks, "Where's your manservant?" I respond, "No idea. Running errands, I suspect. Why?" Lackady says, "I see him here almost daily with his lunch. He's all while away the afternoon on the Herald, staring off at Stanpit March as if holding a vigil." He then laughs. "Quite the appetite for someone in mourning." Reginald laughs, and I worry. I wouldn't be surprised if W takes off in his new motor yacht one of these days. Little holds him here, and his salary is, sadly, bound to dwindle away. Thus ends my journal entry of June 27th. I hope my account proves to be helpful in your investigation. So we're not done yet. We have another letter, and I see what's happened here. Okay, so there is another letter. It's dated June 29th, the day after this one we've just read. So we've got 4 pages June 28th, and then we have a letter from June 29th. It seems like maybe they wrote this case while they still planned 4 mailings. So why don't we analyze this one before we read the next one? A couple of things are jumping out here. So first of all, remember, the checkmate caught fire, very suspicious. And then they find the corpse, which we were told in our last letter was found, a corpse found in the rocks near Seacombe Cliff. All right, so he says they went and looked at the corpse. He says he went to the wrong village. First he went to Swanage before he went to Seacombe. It seems irrelevant. They went to inspect the checkmate, which he tells us about later. Greeley drives them. And then they show him the body. Okay, it's all bloated. It's the right age. Father's age and build. Okay. But shoulders gone that they would have identified. That sounds like this body has been dropped to help fake the father's death. All right. I'm going to go through this, then we'll check in the chat, see if I've missed anything here. Okay, so they're asking William, and William looks like he's in on this. everything about this letter suggests William, who's the father's good friend, is in on this. Not sure why there's a fire though. But it's still seaworthy. It's not seaworthy, but it's floating, so it's still available. Okay. Then Dr. Budge comes. Looks like the chat wants me first. Let's see. Okay. Quote is from The Tempest. Check, Jesse. Looks like there's actually 3 places. Swanage, Seafield, and Seacombe. Okay, let me check that. And what are we to make of them all? This is one of my weaknesses for these games. When I see something like, okay, 3 places, my brain sort of shuts off and says, all right, there's a bunch of places. Okay, Swanage, Seafield. Okay, so 3 places. Swanage, Seafield, and Seacombe. All right, let's see let's slow down. Let's see what they're really talking about. They went to see the boat, the Checkmate, we returned from Swanage. Okay, so Swanage is where the boat is, maybe? They got a message from Swanage. We hurried south in response to the message from 2 nights ago, which I should note came from Swanage rather than Seafield. And in thinking of the Seacombe cliffside, I confused the 2 villages. We have since ventured there. So is it significant that he's saying they got the note about the body? Here's from a previous letter. Somebody from the town spotted a dead seal near Seacombe Cliff. Okay, so the body is near Seacombe Cliff. And then there's some confusion about where to go. They go to the wrong place. I'm still not sure what the meaning of that. If someone thinks they understand what's going on, is it trying to tell us the body's not where it should be, or that the note is not about it, it's not coming from where it should be? I'm not sure. Okay, so shoulder's missing, so you can't clearly identify it. Then, let's see. Then they've got some documents. So the documents are from William, who tells them about the burned boat, and he has more documents. And he says, there's been a fire. And Frederick Granger is the one that put it out, I guess, or noticed it, still floating. And Granger is the guy who did repairs on it, I think. Edward Granger is the solicitor, the brother of Frederick Granger. Is Frederick Granger the farrier, the one? Frederick Granger is the guy who helps with the boat. Or is he the farrier? I think they're both working on the boat, so maybe it doesn't matter. It's also mentioned Frederick Granger often helps with the boat. Okay, so Granger is still hanging around the boat, it sounds. All right. And then he mentions that Holmes must have made a suggestion about the heart pendants. We had a suggestion about putting them on the statue of the Queen. We'll see if that turns out to be the case. And then we sent them someone to decode the hieroglyphics, which matches everything we said. Gold must be buried beneath the floorboards when they run into the room. So they identify it the same place we did, I guess the Great Hall. So it turned out to be the one that happens when you fold it this way. You look at where the green is. Okay, so that's fine. But he says, I'm not going to tear up the floorboards again and be made a fool of. And then before they even get any further, this guy, the person who's writing us, says he noticed something in this room, which maybe is the only, maybe it's not under the floorboards. There's just a clue in this room they're meant to find, and he's found it. And it's a statue of two rabbits sailing a boat. That sounds like the two brothers. It's meant to be. It's on a golden pedestal. After inspecting the pedestal, we discovered it was in fact a chest. So the boat and the rabbits are sitting on top of a chest, which could be the gold in the keel of the boat. But it's got a lock. It's made of metal, that it was painted gold, and a thin line in the shape of a heart. So a little heart around a keyhole. Unable to open it, but they shake it. It doesn't make any noise. And so the brother says, I'm not going to let you break it again like you broke the sarcophagus. That's kind of cute. Okay, keyhole. They can't figure out how to open it, though. They don't have the key, because maybe the key is going to come from the Queen of Hearts. When they put their pendants on it, they're going to get a key. That key will open this, maybe. Okay. They ask William, and it's clear he's sort of prevaricating. He's not admitting. He says he doesn't know anything about it. Our guy says, trust me, this is brand new. It wasn't there before. Fine. Okay. And then he says, we come together to an extent, which is what the father wants. They're going to go to meet the Friday crew. Remember, they suspect that maybe someone leaked that the father was withdrawing money and it led to him being robbed. And then here we get something quite interesting. They run into Hans, who runs the expeditions. Remember, this is not the normal day they all met, so they're not sure who they're going to run into. They run into Hans, and they also run into Benjamin Barnes. He asked how they're faring, and then we ask him if we could talk to him, and he's like, and he just blurts out on his own, never helped Mr. Rodericks with that. Don't know anything about the Herald. Very suspicious. Now, why is that so suspicious? Because we're going to ask about the checkmate. Did you do any work on the checkmate? And he's already denying doing work on the Herald. What's the Herald? The Herald is the boat that the father conspicuously willed to the butler and not to the two sons. So, very interesting. And then he walks off. All right. Then they talk to Hans, who says, hey, I meant to give you this. We played chess by post. Here's the last letter, a quote from a theater play, and the chat was saying it's from The Tempest, from Shakespeare's Tempest. It seems he had a presentiment. I'm not sure what that means. Presentiment. Can someone look up presentiment? Okay. Here is what the note said from the father. Full fathoms 5, my father lies. His last letter, a quote. So is this an entire quote from the play? Full fathoms 5, my father lies. Of his bones are coral made. Those are pearls that were his eyes. So this sounds like it's just talking about someone dead at sea. Dead, the father is lying under the sea. But is there something else about the play The Tempest that if we knew would be a clue? Let's see what the chat says. Will the two hearts fit in the thin line around the keel? I don't think so. I think it's going to be that the hearts go into the outlet to the queen and they're going to get a key. That's my guess. Presentiment means seeing or guessing the future. Interesting. A feeling of what will occur. Okay, that's a new word on me. Pretty cool. Okay. All right, so let's keep reading here. So this is from The Tempest. We're not sure what the meaning is, though. Full fathoms 5, my father lies, of his bones are coral made. Those are pearls that were his eyes. This sounds like it's just a line about the father being buried under in the sea. But maybe if we know more about the Tempest, that will be some sort of clue. Okay, and then he says, hey, I didn't tell my brother Reginald about this, but we also got a letter from Lydia to the father. It's got perfume on it, and the letter says, how I miss you, Papa Bear. Just me sitting by the fire, holding the precious necklace you sent. Do not forget your dear little Lydia. So, is this trying to tell us that it's not a lover, but a daughter? Sure, it's a little confusing. Like, it's a little ambiguous. We're told about they're trying to track down Lydia. Remember, Williams had pointed them towards a choir singer that I think would have been a contemporary of the father. So if it is that Lydia, then it's probably someone he's having an affair with. But now this seems a little different. Oh, I don't know, a student. I wonder if this is a daughter from one that was never. I don't know. What do you guys think? Are you getting that vibe that it's not a woman he's having an affair with? It's either a daughter and it's fitting into this clue, or it's a red herring, not just someone he's having an affair with. But they're going to follow up the next day. He's going to follow up with Caroline and ask about Lydia. And then here are some notes about the checkmate. Let's see here. Torn halyard, tools on the cabin roof, which are suspicious. The ship boatyard owner comes and we ask about if there's anyone unusual. And he says, yes, a scrawny gentleman, funny accent, long hair and a beard. And we say, was it Hans? And he says, sounds about right. He's staying at the Mermaid Inn. So somehow Hans has come to town. It sounds like. And was lurking around. And then we asked about the work done on the checkmate, and he says nothing for some time, just some repairs and a special project. So is he saying, I mean, in letter 2, we got the note of the work done on the checkmate, right? Which was earlier that month. Is he trying to say that that wasn't done on the checkmate? Or he says just some repairs? I mean, does that match this? Is this the repairs? Or is he saying, no, that wasn't done on the checkmate, and maybe it was done on the Herald? And then a special project. Maybe that's this. But a little confusing. Then he says, where's William? And we say, we don't know. And he says, he's hanging around here all day with his lunch. Spending the whole afternoons staring off at Stanpit Marsh. Is that where the father is? And he's waiting for the father, for sign of the father to come home. And he's saying how it's suspicious that this guy's just happily eating his lunch with the father dead. And he's hanging out on his herald, I guess. And the son says, I'm not surprised if he just gets in that herald and drives off. And here we're told that the herald is a motor yacht, for what it's worth. So Rob is saying that he thinks William eating his lunch is really bringing food to the father. And the father is, I think the father is staying on the Herald. I think that makes sense. We thought maybe the father sailed away to an island somewhere, but now I think you're right. I think the father is on the Herald, hiding out. And he's bringing him food. I think it makes sense. Quite the appetite. He's probably bringing like huge lunches that he's sharing with the father who's hanging out in the Herald. Any theories about why the checkmate was burned down, though? That's a little suspicious. So I guess questions are, why was the checkmate burned down? Who is Lydia? What's her relation to our case? And how do you make sense of this part about us asking if work was done, and he says nothing, just some repairs and a special project? This is very confusing to me. Like, we ask, hey, has anything been done to the boat? And he says, oh, no, nothing's been done to that boat for some time. Just some repairs and some big giant project. That doesn't make sense to me. Is that what he's saying? Is he saying a big giant special project was done to the checkmate, but I'm somehow calling that nothing for some time? So that confuses me. Like, why, when we ask him, doesn't he say, yes, a lot has been done, repairs and a special project? Why is he saying nothing? That's confusing to me. And we're told from this that the work was all done on the checkmate, which is now burned down. Remember that they see it. They go to see it before it burns down, and they don't notice anything new about it. Shouldn't they notice, hey, it's got a new coat of paint? Shouldn't, if they've got this on the previous days, shouldn't they be able to look at it and see if indeed this stuff, new stuff, has been done to it? How are we supposed to read that? I find that very upsetting. Like, why is it so ambiguous about whether all this work got done to the checkmate? Am I just overthinking it? I just don't understand why these two brothers, when they go look at it, it hasn't burned down yet, don't say, we see the new paint that got put on it, or they don't. All right, let me check in the chat. Don't forget, we have another letter to read here. Debbie says, maybe it was someone looking for the gold. I'm still suspicious of Greeley who wants to buy it. You're right. The fact that Greeley wants to buy it so badly is very suspicious. Maybe Greeley buys the boat, so burns the boat so he can buy it cheap. That's an interesting idea. Maybe he does burn it so that they're more likely to want to sell it. Does he say, I'm trying to see whether he offers to buy it after it burns down. I know he offers to buy it again. Dreadful night. I can still help you with the yacht sale if you want. Just say the word. The news of the fire. So it's not clear whether Greeley knows about the fire yet. He says, I can still help you. And then when they get home, they're told about the fire. So he could know about it. It's not clear. I don't know why Frederick Granger is responsible for saving it. Maybe he's a boat worker and he's always at the dock. The boat, there was a fire. In its berth, burned to ashes, but no discussion of why, how it caught fire. Emily says maybe the two brass name labels were to change up the Checkmate and the Herald names. See, that's what I was kind of thinking, but the problem is that they go and look at the Checkmate. So they would notice, and the Herald is a motor yacht, and this is a sailboat. So they would notice if the boats weren't the same. And they're talking to the shipyard guys. So clearly they are on the real Checkmate. So I think we must just be reading too much into that. But we have another letter. This is written on the next day. Dear Mr. Holmes, although its contents are disappointing, Reginald and I have managed to unlock the chest we found in the Great Hall yesterday. Further, there has been a singular turn of events. Frederick Granger and his brother Edward have been arrested for setting fire to the Checkmate. We were sat in the parlor this morning when William burst in with today's issue of the Bournemouth Times. Two townspeople apparently recognized the brothers whilst on a late-night stroll near Christchurch Harbor on June 27th, but did not report anything until recently. They saw one brother holding a jar of oil as the other threw a match onto the yacht, and a fireball ensuing. Constable Gregory Snelling is quoted having said, "Prior to this, the only individual under scrutiny was a gray-haired woman in a wheelchair, seen conversing with the Roderick's family butler yesterday morning on the dock. This is to say, no true suspects." According to the article, Frederick did not deny his part in the arson, but attempted to save himself by promising a full explanation some day soon when the time is right. I'm grateful that the Granger brothers were apprehended, but the mention of William and an unknown woman at the dock worries me. I suspected it could have been Miss Lydia Parkhurst. Having visited her today, I know that was not the case. This leaves me all the more puzzled as to who William's friend might have been, and why she was meeting him there of all places. All right, well, we think we know the answer to some of that, but this doesn't sound like it sounds like the Granger brothers were working on behest of the father to me, but we'll find out. You will also be wondering about the contents of the so-called golden chest. Our success was enabled by your previous instructions that we scour the Queen of Hearts statue in the Wonderland garden for any semblance of a keyhole or any impressions or indentations resembling a heart. We found no such thing, but Reginald and I discovered a curious feature in the Queen's palms as we inspected the statue yesterday evening. The half-heart-shaped pendant I normally wear, a gift from Father to each of us, was dangling from my neck as I climbed the statue. I thought it had gotten caught in something, but upon looking down, I saw it had become stuck to the Queen's hand. I tugged gently and it came loose. There was no sticky or viscous residue on it, so I held it to the queen's hand again. Sure enough, it was drawn to it, as if snatched up by the queen. I demonstrated to Reginald, and he quickly tried his own pendant. Once Reginald allowed the queen to hold it in her other hand, we heard a number of clicks and whirs, and a panel in the sleeve fell open. From it tumbled the key to the chest. We were both elated, thinking it would yield the answer to at least some of the questions. But we turned the key to find a meager scrap of cloth, daubed with the number 5. Reginald and I broke into laughter. So much effort, Mr. Holmes, for just a number. All right, let's turn to the chat and see if everyone gives me the credit I am due. John says, good job about the Queen of Hearts. Emily says, we were right. Debbie says, yay. Okay, so it was exactly as expected. The pendants go in the Queen of Hearts' hands. It triggers a mechanism when they're both there. That gives the key. The key unlocks the little statuette. And inside is a scrap of cloth that says the number 5. This is all making sense. The father wants them to come together, to work together, to solve a mystery, to find the treasure. Okay, now backing up a little, Debbie says, was the woman the father in disguise? That is a very interesting theory. Okay, so a gray-haired woman in a wheelchair conversing with the butler on the dock. All right, so when I saw this, I thought, okay, it's a gray-haired woman visiting the father secretly, which is still an option, but I like Debbie's theory probably a little better, that this is actually the father in disguise. It's either a woman visiting the father or the father in disguise, which I like better. All right, now, we know the brothers were caught lighting it on fire. The question is why? We had a theory that they were trying to lower the price of it. I'm not too thrilled with that theory. But then when they catch him, he says, he doesn't deny it, but he says, someday soon when the time is right, I'll explain it. That seems to me like something, well, anyone, a criminal might say that, but also might be something that you would say if the father paid them to burn it down and said, you know, if you're caught, don't say anything. I'll explain it, you know, when I come out, when I reveal I'm alive. Anyone have any intuition? Are they working for the father, or are they up to no good and are they just saying this? What is the number 5 going to tell them, I wonder? Let's continue. I will add, we did consider that the checkmate is docked in slip number 5 at the harbor. Reginald spent hours today searching it in earnest, but to no avail. All he found was a scorched old invoice. 3 lines in father's hand. Are still partially legible, and one final phrase is fully intact. ST at SCA. O it O. You have missing. Payment already dispatched. Okay, it's in the father's handwriting. This sounds like it's talking about one of our 3 places, which helps explain why they've sort of obfuscated them. We've got, well, no, I guess not. That's not right. We've got Swanage, Seafield, and Seacombe. That does not match any of the SCA where I thought it might. Oh, it's not even at. It's something ASCA. Is that invoice going to match the other invoice? Let's keep reading. Besides these minor discoveries and news of the arrest, I must also address my meeting with Miss Parkhurst. Following recent trends, it begot more questions than answers. I took the train to London at 8:30 this morning, lying that Greeley needed me for something while Reginald visited the checkmate. In no more than 2 hours, I was sitting before Madame Billington, the Guildhall School's registrar. She has a regal visage and towers over most people at the school. She looked down to me through curling forelocks and said brightly, "How may I help you?" I was forthcoming. "Madame Billington, my father is Reginald Rodricks II, recently deceased. My brother and I are trying to get his affairs in order and have reason to believe he has been assisting financially one of your students, Miss Lydia Parkhurst. If this is the case, as his heirs, we would like a strict record of the account." She chimed, "Perhaps you would like to meet Miss Parkhurst?" I nodded, and the registrar led the way, humming, "As you will know, we offer unique scholarships to deserving young musicians. Your father was one of our generous patrons." I followed her up marble stairs, then along a corridor lined on both sides with small rooms in which students offered up a cacophony of violins, cellos, pianos, and at least one trombone, and one red-haired woman banging kettle drums. They were undoubtedly skilled, but all at once the students conjured true bedlam. Madame Billington knocked at one of the doors, then opened it. "Lydia, you have a visitor, Mr. Roderick's son." The young woman lifted her hands from the piano. "Ah, that dear man!" Her gaze seemed unfocused. Her clothes had no aspect of finery. "He has been kind, always mentions you and your brother. You're twins, no?" Madame Billington pressed me forward and whispered, "Lean down." Miss Parkhurst reached up to feel my face, at which point I spotted her cane against the wall. I felt an awful fool. I simply said, "Your playing is lovely. I will speak with Madame Billington and continue to honor any arrangements you had with father. That is, as long as we are capable." Then, realizing that Miss Parkhurst appeared to be unaware of father's accident, I informed her, saying only that there was an incident while he was sailing. She twitched her nose. "He came last month to watch our recital. I remember he said he was growing tired of business, that he wanted to live a more simple life. I'm sorry." She then took me by the wrist and asked me to wait, procuring a pencil and some paper. "Before you go," Miss Parkhurst said, as she scribbled carefully, "here." She held up the paper. On it were several musical notes and a thank you, all legible but quite roughly written. She smiled weakly, adding, "It's a song I'm composing, the first few notes, that is. I'm working on my writing, too." With those words, I thanked her and made my way back to the train station. On the ride home, my every thought was devoted to the letter we received yesterday, supposedly from Miss Parkhurst. I doubt she would have had someone pen such a missive for her. Thus I wonder, who might have forged such a letter, Mr. Holmes, and why? Father's puzzles continue to lead us in circles, and even if he did hide his fortune away before the accident, I feel more certain it has been plundered with every day that passes. With modesty, the situation is bewildering. I implore you, as does Reginald, to help us find a path through this storm. Your obedient servant, Robert Rodricks III. All right, well, that's all of our letters. And reminder, this is the last letter we're going to get from them. So this is what we've got. We do have a bit of a mystery with Lydia. So Lydia is blind. And the clue about her giving us her writing, which is very primitive, is to convince him, Robert, and us, that she could not have written the letter we got from Lydia. that letter is the letter that said, let's find that letter. So this was obviously written by someone else, either someone pretending to be Lydia or a different Lydia. Don't forget, we have jumped to the conclusion with the butler's help that it's this Lydia at the school. Is this going to be the mother and daughter? Yeah, look at that. It's going to be from the mother, and it's not, she's not saying, do not forget me, your dear little Lydia. I think she's saying, do not forget our daughter, little Lydia. Right? Don't you think that's what's happening? She's saying, don't forget your daughter, little Lydia. Remember, he's named his son, given his son his name, so it wouldn't be crazy if the wife, the mother, named the daughter Lydia for herself. But let's even make sure this letter was clearly written from Lydia. It's not. The letter that he's received doesn't say who it's from. So it might even be that the letter, let me just make sure if that's true. I'm not even sure. He says he takes the letter aside. Another detail. Singular perfumed envelope sent from London addressed to father. Okay, so it doesn't say who it's from. We just jumped to the conclusion that it's signed, do not forget your dear little Lydia. That this was a signage saying, I'm Lydia. But now I think it's not. I think it's from the woman who he's had a daughter with, who he's funding. And the daughter's name is Lydia. And the person who sent this letter, it's not a forged letter. It's the letter from the mother. Now, the question is that the wheelchair, gray-haired woman? This could be the mother of Lydia that is going to meet with the father. Any thoughts on that? Mark Poole says that sounds plausible. Debbie says that makes sense if the letter was from the mother. Jonathan says, I think that makes sense. Okay, so one of the mysteries to us, we might need to make a list of what things do we not yet understand, but this is a big one. So I wonder if we can make a little note of things we'd like to understand. Clearly, I'm not as organized today as I should have been with my cards. But if we were to make a list of things we don't know for sure, let's see. The list would look like something like okay, so who is the gray-haired woman in wheelchair? Okay. The other one, another question is, are the people who burned it down, are the Grangers? Okay, so our other question is, the Grangers crooks, trying to steal the gold or working for the father. Okay. Another question is the burned partial invoice. What does it mean? Another question is the cloth 5 meaning. I suppose our other question is, where is the father? Although I think we know the answer to that. Another question might be, who is the corpse? I think it's just going to turn out to be a dead body. That, not that they killed anyone, but just that they found a body to use. And then maybe another question would be the role of the herald. What's the other boat being used for? Any other questions, leaving aside answers for a second? Any other questions? Maybe who is Lydia's mother? If we're reading this right about Lydia's mother. Any other questions? That's an awfully big coincidence. There just happened to be another dead guy floating in the sea. Why was the boat burned? Good. Why was boat burned? I'm going to add here, why confusion over the checkmate work? And the special project. I mean, I suppose that the simplest answer is the one he himself came up with, right? Because they open it up, they see the number 5, right? And they broke into laughter. And then he says, but it did occur to them that the checkmate is in slip 5. So is this not the easiest answer? Does it not make sense that he's exactly right, that the 5 was directing them to the slip where the checkmate is, because we think the gold is in the keel of the checkmate? Is that not the answer right there? That's a little anticlimactic. Especially given that he's saying that right here. Like, why would they steal that from us for instead of letting us figure that out by mentioning earlier what slip they're in? It's a little weird that it's like, hey, we found a 5 and here's the answer. But this would be a clean, simple answer. It's directing them to the boat. A scrap of cloth daubed with the number 5. Any significance that it's a scrap of cloth? Is it a scrap of sailcloth? It's weird that you would put it on cloth instead of a piece of paper, isn't it? I guess you won't hear it rattle if it's on cloth. It just seems a little weird. All right, what about this? Payment already dispatched. Is this something about the body? What could it be about? I was wondering if the Grangers knew about the gold and wanted to expose it before the brothers sold the boat. That doesn't seem right. John says, I read it as strongly suggests someone is interfering with the father's intended plan. I'm not sure what Jonathan is talking about, except if he's saying that the burning of the boat is trying to get it. Why would you... Yeah. It doesn't make sense to me. The burning of the boat doesn't make sense, but let's come back to that. Let's see, because this could provide an answer to this. What could this be about? This could be an invoice to pay these brothers to burn down the boat, right? All he found was a scorched old invoice. It does say old invoice. 3 lines. Okay. Now... So everything to the left was burned off of these. Could be payment for the special project of the keel, but that we already seem to have a full invoice for. So this is different work. Could it be an invoice for planting the body? Could it be an invoice? Payment already dispatched. Let's see. Three items on an invoice worked on or items ordered. Do we actually know it's an invoice, or are they just assuming that? He doesn't say he thinks it's an invoice. He says all he found was a scorched invoice. I'm still not sure I understand, Jonathan, your point. All he found was a scorched old invoice. 3 lines in father's hand are partially legible, and one final phrase. But maybe we can look at this other invoice to see how this invoice should be structured. Payment already dispatched, payment paid in full, top, middle, bottom. So top, middle, bottom. I mean, you might expect then it would be parts, labor, and then the summary, but I don't know. What do we think they could be writing about? They could be writing about the checkmate. They could be writing about the herald. A special project. SCAST. Just looking for. Wanted to become Seafield. Checkmate, Herald. Something, a scar. If it's an invoice, what would it be purchasing? Where's our other invoice? Steering wheel. Keel. Customer will supply. Is this an invoice for the construction of the keel that the customer is supplying? Is this saying missing? Final phrase is fully intact. I guess this is what he's talking about, being fully intact. You have yeah, it's not clear why this has sort of made us think it's missing, but that would just be an I and an S. Like, are we to believe that this is a short missing gap? It's hard. It would be nice if he explained to us like how big a gap this was. Are we to infer that you couldn't have more than a couple letters between the M and the SING? Or could it be a whole line of whole set of words? An invoice, you're paying for work. Now, it's not a letter, it's an invoice. Payment already dispatched. Just a scar, just a... it feels very ambiguous. Do it now, you have my blessing. Payment already dispatched. That's pretty compelling. Do it now, you have my blessing. Payment already dispatched. If Jonathan's right, do it now, you have my blessing. Payment already dispatched. This would be about the body then, don't you think? Or burning. It would be either about burning the boat instructions or about the body. How about, could it be something about a cadaver, a body? SCA. Lost a SCA. Just a scar? Is he talking about his birthmark? Just a scare? Just a scare. But the channel is saying just a scare. That's an interesting idea, but that doesn't. I'm not sure that makes sense, does it? Just a scare. Do it now. What is he saying? Just a scare. That doesn't sound right. That's not what he's not trying to scare anyone. How about just a scandal, scar? Does feel like there can't be that many words starting with SCA. Maybe someone can look online. SCA, scandal, scar, scavenger hunt? Just a scavenger hunt? Lost a, just a, lost a. Um, if the final two lines are "Do it now, you have my blessing," who is he? Who is he? Who is he paying? Would it? Does this not suggest that this is the invoice he's giving to the brothers who are burning it down? Like, why else would his invoice with his writing be on the boat? And then shouldn't that first line then be telling them what to do regarding burning it down? If it's about the body, why is this invoice on the boat? It's he's writing it. How does it get in the slip 5? I managed to locate an invoice from the recent work our father had done. It had a note fixed to it. So in this case, he's getting an invoice from the company to him. That's why he had it in his possession, saying he's paid in full, and it's from the shipyard. So why is this invoice found in slip 5 with the father's handwriting? I mean, maybe it's not an invoice. Maybe it's not an invoice. It's like a letter. All right, let's see what the chat wants. Scam? John says, if they were hired to burn the boat, could the special project be about making the boat less likely to go down if it was set aflame? I don't understand the whole. I still think scavenger hunt would be the best explanation for what this letter would be describing to do. But I don't. Jonathan is making a suggestion about the burning down of the boat. Perhaps we should focus on that concept of why, if the father is orchestrating the burning of the boat, for what reason? Who does it benefit? Let's look at our questions for a second. We're going to guess that this is about just saying that the gold is in the bottom of the checkmate. The father's in the herald, that the butler's bringing food. The corpse is just going to be a dead body that someone found. The herald is just going to be where the father hangs out. Lydia's mother is going to be unanswerable. It's just the woman he's talking to. This is our big question we don't know. And the partial invoice we don't understand. And we don't understand whether they're working for the father. Maybe the woman in the wheelchair is Lydia's mother, or else I think I like better that it's the father in disguise. So why was the boat burned? The two brothers are arrested. One of them has been trying to buy the boat. That would suggest that they were trying to steal it. And they weren't hired by the father. The only thing that was making me think they were hiring by the father is that when he's arrested, he says, that it'll all come out. He doesn't deny it. Did not deny his part in the arson, attempted to save himself by promising a full explanation when the time is right. So the same person that put out the fire was caught creating the fire. We know that the other one was trying to buy it cheap. They were arrested for setting fire. Two people saw them. One brother holding a jar of oil as the other threw a match into the yacht. And then from the other letter, we're told that it was only the work of Granger that prevented it from burning down. So I think maybe the first instinct was correct. They're trying to damage it, but not let the fire get to the keel so that they can buy it. And I think it's just a clever little red herring that he's saying, I'll explain it later. This is just a lie to delay. Rob says, I think the note said just a scare. So Rob is arguing counter the proposal I just made, and he's saying the father did hire them and said it just a scare. You have my blessing. I just don't understand what the point of that would be. Why would the father want the boat burned down? What would be the point of that? That makes no sense, does it? Debbie says it's not them that want to buy it. Oh, it's not the Grangers that want to buy it. It's Greeley who wants to buy it. I think you might be right. Let's see. It's Greeley who wants to buy it. Debbie is right. See my earlier comments. How could they found out the brothers are thinking of selling? He could have found out the brothers are thinking of selling it. He wants the gold revealed before then, hence the burning. Maybe the father thinks it's taking his son too long. Okay, well, let's address two of these things first of all. First of all, Debbie is right and then is making a hugely important point that it was Greeley who wanted to buy the boat, not the Grangers. The Grangers are the bank guy and his brother who helps work on the boats, and who have demonstrated no desire to buy it. I do want, going back to the other thing about the father hiring them to burn down the boat. I think this part doesn't make sense. If you think this says, if you think it says just a scare, that does not sound like you're burning down the boat so the sons will find the treasure. That sounds like you would be trying to scare them or scare someone, and that doesn't make sense. You can't posit that the father hired them to burn down the boat for a scare and then say that his real motive was to help them find the treasure. Why would the father want the boat burned down? You could imagine that the father wants the boat burned down to the keel to help the sons find it, but then this couldn't say just a scare. It would have to say something else, like it's just a scavenger hunt, do it now, or it's just a... Rob says, maybe he wants to burn the boat down to prevent it being sold. He knows Greeley is trying to buy it. That's certainly possible, but then it can't say just a scare. If we think this is payment about that. Of course, it could be something totally different. This might not be about the fire. This could be an older invoice about the dead body that was planted and found. We're going to stop in a couple minutes and we'll pick this up when we get our final letter. We'll have one more shot to go through this. You'll have a couple weeks to think about it before then we get our solution, and we'll be able to talk about our final theories before the solution. So maybe we're just going to wrap this up here. You've got stuff to chew on. You got homework. What we'll do is we'll stop here. This has been a long session, hour and 42 minutes. we'll stop here. You can leave your theories, your ideas in the comments. Remember that the Dear Holmes system does allow people to send in their official theories of the case, and then they'll pick their favorite one beforehand. You'll have 2 weeks, I think, before we go through the solution. We'll talk in that session before we read the answer. We'll talk about our final theories. It's interesting that this case has managed to throw us a couple curveballs right at the end. Our main theory of the case still stands that we figured out very early on, but we've got a couple little subsidiary mysteries. And it'll be interesting to see what the best theory is for that note. I don't feel like we've got a full handle on it. We don't really know. I'll show the questions again before we leave so you know what questions that I think are forefront of our mind, especially what's with that partial invoice, which is right there. What were the brothers doing? Why? We know what they were doing. They're starting fire. Were they working for the father, or were they crooks trying to steal the money? If they were trying to steal money, shouldn't they just get in the boat and drive it away, or open up the keel? Why burn it? Who is that lady? Who is Lydia's mother, if our theory about that is correct? All right, so we're going to stop here. Next week, I'll be doing a live channel update and question and answer. I'd love to have questions from you guys. Ideas, suggestions, anything you want to talk about is fine. That'll be next week at 3 p.m. And then the week after that, hopefully our last letter will arrive for this case. And we'll get one last shot at the solution before we read the answer from Holmes or fake Holmes. Thank you for joining me. A pleasure as always. Probably we'll do a stream or two this coming week. If you want to help decide what to play, you can visit the Board Game Geek Guild for this section. There's a game queue thread. You can suggest what games you'd like to see played. If you like these videos and want to see more, please subscribe and give this video a thumbs up. Great to see you all. I'll talk to you on the next video.